Welcome to the Celebration of You. I'm your host, Holly Dowling. I'm thrilled to share with you incredible people from all over the world who are living and leading extraordinary lives. From overcoming immense adversity to discovering the secret sauce to leading with courage and grace. Their stories are going to bring you hope and inspiration. Now let the stories begin. Hi, everybody, and Happy New Year. Happy New Decade, as a matter of fact. What an exciting year and decade we have ahead of us. And you know, it's so fascinating to me. Everybody that listens to the show, I want to kick off the year and say thank you from the bottom of my heart for people all over the world. We are 160 countries and counting. We have listeners, and it's because of people like you that no matter what your age is, no matter what your gender, wherever you live, it doesn't matter. Everybody finds hope in hearing stories of other people whose lives are making a difference. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you. And as we go into this month, this was really important to me that what we're about to focus on and a few of the guests that you're going to hear, especially starting off with this beautiful guest today, the serendipity of life that I speak about a lot. You have no idea who you're about to meet, and it can change your life. And so I'm going to introduce you to this guest, and then we'll talk about how we met and the timing of this interview for this very, very, very special month. So welcome, Heidi Olson. Hi, my friend.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I am ecstatic because, as you know, and we'll tell everybody how we met, but just to know that you're all about to find out what Heidi does. So I'll tell you her title, and then we'll get into the heart of this, and I'll just go ahead and reveal that this month is Child Trafficking Month. And I don't know that I've ever met a human being quite extraordinary like Heidi, who this is her work that she specializes in. And what she sees and what she does can change people's lives, but it also can be the most heart-wrenching work. And I think you're an angel on assignment, Heidi, because you are the program manager at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City. And your specialty, and you're becoming nationally and globally renowned because you are a sexual assault nurse examiner. And when we first met, you were like, I'm sane. I'm like, I know you're sane, but what do you mean? Remember that? I was like,
yes.
Is that an acronym? And you're like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. So yeah, we have to tell everybody. So we met in November in Canada. We were both invited to present and speak at the first ever global summit around child exploitation and child trafficking, hosted by our dear, amazing friend, Charlene, who's the founder of Internet Sense. So let's go back to that day, right? That was powerful. Yeah.
Do you mean like the night before the summit?
You mean when a couple of us had way too much fun? Or was that night that we were woken up in the night in our hotel?
Yes.
Oh, that was one of the scariest nights I've ever had.
That was terrible.
It was. And I know people that are listening are like, wait, what happened? And we can just both admit the hotel we were staying at in Canada at exactly between 3 and 3:10 in the morning, huge, loud screaming, fighting, kicking doors going on. And we were both on the same floor in this hotel. And it was so vulgar and gross, I was scared to death to stick my head out because I was afraid of what might happen, to say, please be quiet, right?
Yes,
yeah.
It was awful.
Yeah. And they called the police, and it took the police 3 hours to get there?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that was the start of what was going to be an all day of heart-wrenching and education. And this summit was really about bringing experts from all over the world to share. You know, we had Cheville, who is former district attorney in Pennsylvania. We had your specialty is examining children that have been victims. We had FBI. We had, we heard from all kinds of people. And so what I would love to talk about, Heidi, is first of all, you are in a line of work that most people would wonder, how on earth did you fall into this, or was this something you pursued? Will you tell us about your journey being a nurse and how this has evolved to what you're doing?
Sure.
Okay.
So I have been a nurse for almost 11 years. And I actually started out being a nurse right at the beginning of the good old recession of 2008, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And so nobody wanted to hire new nurses back then. And I was growing up and went to school in southern New Mexico, and my whole dream was just to get out of southern New Mexico. So I'm applying for jobs everywhere, and nobody wants to hire me. So I had passed my boards. I was an RN, and I was working at a trash company, like a disposal company.
What?
Waiting, yes, for someone to hire me as a nurse. So all that to say, I ended up applying at a local hospital on a pediatric unit out of desperation, and they hired me 24 hours later.
Wow.
And so it actually, I think, was just such a blessing in disguise, because I learned so much working on that unit. I had incredible mentors and really, really good nurses I worked with, and I realized that I loved working with kids. And so I stayed there for 5 years. And then in the meantime, in those 5 years, I had learned about human trafficking, and my hometown is very close to the Mexico border. So now looking back, I took care of lots of trafficking victims. I just didn't recognize it at the time. But I really had a heart for, the more I learned about exploitation and sex trafficking, I wanted to do something in that realm, but I didn't know what that looked like as a nurse. And so about 5 years into being a nurse, our hospital was bought out by a new company, and the new company was like, this unit is not a moneymaker. We are going to shut down pediatrics. And I was like, I do not want to get stuck on an adult floor.
That was smart. You want to stick with the kiddos.
Yes, and I knew that I really liked that population in nursing. So I started applying at different children's hospitals all over the United States. And my brother had moved right outside of Kansas City about 6 months before. So I applied at Children's Mercy. Thankfully, they were willing to interview me. They hired me right after my interview. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing this. So I started working just kind of on like the regular medical surgical floors here at Children's Mercy. And I'd say about a year into that, the hospital sent out a thing to all the nurses saying, we're hiring sexual assault nurse examiners. And I think for me, just something clicked, and I thought this could be a way that I could really start to work with a population that I care about as a nurse. Like two things, like these two passions I have could collide. So I applied for it with no experience, and thankfully they hired me. So I've been a SANE nurse for a little over 5 years now, and about 2 years into it, one of our program managers quit. And so they were like, would you want to step into this with not really a whole lot of experience? But,
you just keep finding, things just keep happening that were like divinely designed for you, but you had no idea, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And that really just, a lot of things were happening all at once, but going into that leadership position and then starting to recognize how many trafficking victims we were treating as SANE nurses just kind of all exploded at once, to the point of where it's like I started presenting all of the time about how do we recognize these kids? How do we take care of them? Making connections in our city. So I'm still managing the SANE program, which I love. And we are really doing, I think, cutting edge work in terms of recognizing and intervening for kids who are being trafficked from a healthcare standpoint.
Yeah. Well, and what I learned from you, and I just have to say, you are a perfect example of somebody that's just been willing to say yes when the door opens, with no idea what you're walking into, but it's been life-changing. And it's also like your divine destiny, because you have such a beautiful spirit, Heidi, and I can't even fathom what we're about to talk about is what you have spent the last 5 years seeing. And I think that I want people to hear, and I want people to really listen to the show, because although it can be heart-wrenching and graphic, this is not happening on other sides of the border. This is happening in our own backyards, right? This is in suburban areas that people don't realize, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually was in a meeting this morning. We're doing like a citywide community event about human trafficking at the end of the month, and just sitting with all the different leaders in Kansas City who are bringing awareness about trafficking. I think we have perceptions and stereotypes of trafficking that are not at all accurate. So it gives us this false sense of safety, like, well, it's only people in poverty being trafficked, or it's only immigrants, or it's only whatever, who are being trafficked. So I'm safe from this, when the reality is that traffickers will use any vulnerability to start to coerce and force someone into, a horrific life.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so important. So let's talk about, you shared a ton of data at the event, but I think that would be a good place to start. I mean, you're sitting in Kansas City, which people wouldn't imagine the magnitude of trafficking happening there. And in the last couple of years, what have you seen? Talk to us about how many cases on average you're seeing. Let's talk about the ages. Where are they coming from, right? Can you give us some of the details behind this?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So, one thing that most people don't realize when it comes to kids is that by law, you don't have to have a trafficker present or a third party present for something to be considered sex trafficking. So what I mean by that is, say there's a 15-year-old kid who is homeless and an adult approaches them and says, hey, if you have sex with me, I'll give you a place to stay. That's considered trafficking because we're exploiting a minor. Even if the minor, quote unquote, consented to that, they're exchanging a sex act for a good. And so that suddenly really widens the pool of children who are being exploited and trafficked, because it's not just, oh, there's a trafficker pimping this kid out every night. It can be kids who are being exploited by adults, but there's no third party. But so all of that being said, when I became a SANE nurse, probably 3 months into it, I took care of a patient that I just knew in my gut, this kid is being trafficked. She's
How did you know?
To it.
What was the gut? What were the signs, just to tell people?
Yeah, so it was a 16-year-old female. She came into our ER and she was there for testing for sexually transmitted infections. And so maybe that alone wouldn't necessarily raise red flags, although I think any kid coming in for that more questions should be asked. But her story started to I just got this sickening feeling. So she had been in state custody. She had run away 6 months before. She ran away to another state with an older girl she met on Facebook. The night before I saw her, the police had arrested her, and the older girl were driving somewhere. The police pulled them over and they had drugs and weapons in their car. So the police arrested this older girl. They asked my patient her name and she lied about her name and who she was. So thankfully, they matched her name to a database of missing children and realized she was from Missouri. So they brought her back. She was staying with grandma, and then grandma had brought her in for STD testing. And I just felt like something is not, there's so many red flags even in that story. So I assessed her body. She has tattoos. She won't tell me where they're from. She has cigarette burns on her inner thighs. Won't tell me where they're from. She had horrific genital trauma. Just would not admit to really anything. She told me she'd had maybe 2 or 3 consensual partners, and I just could not. I knew she wasn't giving me the full picture. She had 4 sexually transmitted infections.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah, so just all these things, one red flag after the other, where I just, in my gut, no matter what this kid's telling me, I know there's some type of exploitation going on. So it was a really heartbreaking scenario because we didn't really have a protocol and nobody really knew what to do. It was like we just got passed around from one police department to the other, to the other, to the other, with no one taking a report on this kid. We called the human trafficking hotline and they were like, well, it's going to take a couple of days for this to go anywhere. And it's an ER, so we can't keep her for a couple of days. It was a weekend, so I called Child Protective Services, but they were basically like, she could stay with her grandma. And I just felt
goodness.
Yes. I mean, I felt like I was going to throw up when I left the ER because it was this helpless feeling of, I know this child is not safe. I'm afraid she's going to run and nobody knows what to do. We don't have protocols in place. Obviously, these multidisciplinary teams don't know how to communicate with each other. I felt sick. So I later found out that she ran that night. And to my knowledge, She has not been found. I mean, the FBI were like, we think she's being trafficked again if she's alive at this point.
Oh my goodness. And it's those kind of things. You just said something that I don't want anybody to miss. What I learned too, listening to you and several other people at the summit, is we are not working together as a team. The police only do so much. Then, like you said, you're in the ER. You know, you get this child, who are you supposed to call, right? Yeah. Social services. I mean, it's like there's these disconnects all the way through the chain. And then where do these children end up? And that's like one that was, you know, we know these are the extreme. Let's talk about the kids that are being exploited in white collar homes and neighborhoods, right? You're seeing that too. And what are the signs? What can give us some tips and things we can start doing, right, to look for?
Yeah. So here's a story that I think will horrify everyone, but I think it's a really good example of how trafficking is kind of shifting. So yes, the girl I'm talking about was sort of your stereotypical, every red flag in the book, you know, for sure. Any provider who had seen her should have had red flags. But here's another kid who was never actually physically touched or abused by anybody, but she was still trafficked. So this was a girl in a suburban middle-class family. And her vulnerability is that she had a cell phone. So she's a teenager. This guy starts talking to her, a trafficker. Of course, she doesn't know that. So
okay,
he's
but
like,
wait, there's details. I'm into details. She has a cell phone. Give us an idea of how old she is. Parents listening.
She's about 15.
So she's 15. And most kids
nobody's looking at her phone, right? No, there's no oversight.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, keep going. Yep.
This guy starts talking to her on Snapchat, and she thinks it's another boy her age. So they start talking, and very quickly it escalates to him following her and basically controlling her on every single social media app that she's on. So he wants to know where she is, what she's doing, who she's talking to at all times, but they've never physically met in person. So then eventually as he's grooming and manipulating her, he goes down the route of, well, can you send me naked pictures? And so, you know, she's like, okay, well, I think he likes me. Everybody my age does this. Okay, I will. So she does. And then a couple of days later, he comes back with, I'm not your age. I am, you know, a 30-year-old adult male. If you do not do what I tell you to do, I will show these pictures to your parents, to your friends, to everyone at school.
Oh my God.
Right. So this 15-year-old is paralyzed and is like, okay, what do you need me to do? So he says, at night, I want you to log into this webcam site, basically. And here's the username and password. And from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m., you will get on there and you will do whatever people ask of you. So she's going on to a site where basically it's live stream pornography, and people are paying this guy and asking her to act out different sex acts in real time.
And she's doing it because she's scared to death that he will harm or share this with people.
And she is in the room next to her parents. There's a shared wall, right? With this kid is being trafficked. That meets the legal definition of trafficking. No one is necessarily raping her, but she is being sexually exploited, traumatized. It feels under this guy's control. And so trafficking is shifting in terms of, obviously there's still sort of the stereotype of there are people who, you know, get sold in red light districts, but it's also looking a lot like what I just described, which that was a true story of a kid that lived here. And so eventually she, thank God, told her parents. And what the police found was that they never caught this guy, as far as I know, but he was doing this to 6 other girls her age. So every night he had the different times laid out for them to log in just hour after hour while he made money off of them.
Oh, and now this is why this is so flipping scary. This could be happening to children, our own children, our nieces, our nephews, children that are friends of our children. So how easy would it be for that kid to share this with another kid, right? Because that's what's happening. And social media and cell phones, and she's 15. This is happening to boys and girls, right? As young as, let's talk about the startling facts of how young some of these children are that you're examining or coming in, and what's the latest, and this makes me sick, but child on child, right?
Yes. So the youngest, in terms of sexual abuse victims, I've seen kids as young as 3 months old. Oh. But in terms of trafficking, we've seen kids that are 2 or 3. And usually they're being trafficked by a family member when they're that young. So we had a kid, a 3-year-old, I think she was 3. And her mom was allowing her to be sexually assaulted in exchange for drugs. And so it's not just that stereotype that this is happening to 16, 17, 18-year-olds. I mean, this is happening to kids that aren't even old enough to disclose what's going on, which is sickening.
I know. And you're seeing now that they call them perpetrators, right? They're not even old enough to be an adult.
Yeah. So then kind of a new trend that we're seeing as well, sort of in the same vein of sexual exploitation, is a lot of kids we typically would call them perpetrators just because that's like the legal term that we use, but really a better term is probably youth with harmful sexual behaviors or youth with problematic sexual behaviors. And we're just seeing this insane spike in the amount of, it's typically boys who are sexually assaulting other kids, and they're typically ages 11 to 15. And we've been tracking this data for the last couple of years, but really in 2015 is when we saw the shift that when we look at age ranges, the majority of our perpetrators are falling into that age range, and it has continued every year since 2015. So it's really scary to think about a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old committing a really violent assault against another child. And there's not always maybe necessarily trafficking type of associated with it, but it's a level of sexual violence that's really concerning. And we're seeing a correlation with pornography. So pornography is everywhere. Any child that has access to a screen, you can accidentally be exposed to pornography. And so if kids are accidentally or intentionally seeing pornography, what they're looking at are typically really violent images. I think a lot of parents don't realize that pornography today is not like Playboy from the 1960s. You're not just seeing an image of a naked woman. Pornography today is very violent, extremely graphic, and a lot of times it's really like watching a sexual assault.
Yeah.
So if that's what kids are learning about sex from, and then they act it out on somebody else, it starts to explain, it's not the sole reason. I mean, there's other factors why kids commit sexual assaults, but it's a huge contributor in our digital age. And again, I think parents are completely unaware that their kids as young as 8 years old are being exposed to this type of pornography. So then that's sort of circling back around to the trafficking problem. We know pornography desensitizes us, and it's easy to view people as objects the more and more that pornography is viewed. So you can buy an object, you can be violent towards an object, you can exploit an object. So the porn industry perpetuates the trafficking industry and vice versa.
Yeah. You know what's scary too, as I'm listening to you, it's coming back to me, what we learned also is the correlation with the gaming. How much of these kids are playing these games that are so violent, but when you really get into some of these games, parents, and games that we see, and my kids were playing 15 years ago, but the games become addictive, and what they're seeing is brutal beatings. They actually are seeing sexual acts being done, even in fictitious cartoon animation. And to your point, it's not just, some of the children, I'm sure many have been sexually abused themselves, so they're turning around and acting it out, but it's becoming, we're so anesthetized, right? This is becoming the norm to see these violent things out there. And there was a story, I'm going to be really graphic right now, and I'm just going to say, I don't usually use foul language on my show, but I really want people, I hope we're scaring the shit out of you, because I literally feel like we have to be so scared right now to wake up and actually see what's going on and start making our eyes open, and what can we start doing. And remember one of the gentlemen, I think it might have been the FBI gentleman or head of the police force for the undercover stuff, but he said at the summit, he said that he was doing a project, or somebody mentioned they were doing a project with their daughter and on the computer, and all she was doing was trying to create something to do with cats, and she started to put in pussycats.
Yes.
And what came up? All of a sudden, he leans over, and his 8-year-old, all of this stuff that's porn is showing up. And that's how easy. Like, when you just said that, I want people to know it's in innocence too, that these things happen that fast, right? Into these children.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, it makes my stomach turn. So I know there's endless stories. Wasn't there a story you shared with me, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm just being really hopeful, but wasn't there a story of a success that you were able to get a child out of trafficking? Am I feeling like you shared that?
No,
okay.
Yes, that's correct. So,
okay.
Yes, not every story, thankfully, is always horrible and hopeless feeling. But yeah, so last year I was called in to see a patient, and she had tons of red flags. So teenage girl, she had been on the run for 2 weeks, and she had sent her mom something on Snapchat, like, I'm in a really effed up situation or something like that. So mom was really concerned for her safety. And she had been found by the police. She had left the scene of an accident. And so the police were actually arresting her. There was a warrant out for arrest for something unrelated. And as she was getting in their police car, she fell and hit her head on the pavement. So, which thankfully, that meant she had to come in and see us.
Yeah, so, that was a blessing, right?
It was.
Wow.
And so as we started to just assess what was going on with her, I mean, again, in my gut, it was that same sinking feeling of this kid's being trafficked. And like most kids, they're not going to say they're being trafficked, and they're not going to allude to exploitation or just come out and say it. We have to listen to our guts and know the red flags. And so, long story short, she tested positive for drugs. We found sperm on one of her vaginal swabs that we had been doing for STD testing. So for us, we knew that she had a sexual encounter very recently, and she couldn't remember it. So she let me do an exam, and she had genital trauma. She had sexually transmitted infections. Oh. I mean, just all of the red flags for being exploited. And she had a phone with her that her mom ended up coming in, and she's like, I don't know whose phone that is. So long story short, she admitted to being trafficked finally. And so she was going to a drug rehab facility, and she ended up running. So we didn't know where she was after that, which to me was just like this horrible sinking feeling. Yeah. In the meantime, thankfully, law enforcement had taken her evidence that we had collected, including that phone. They were able to find her trafficker because of that phone. And he was trafficking another juvenile when they arrested him. Oh. And they ended up finding this girl with him again. So she had gone back, which again is really normal for trafficking victims. And so they found her, they found another juvenile, and she came back to us for another exam. And we were able to send her to a safe place that specializes in trauma-informed care and taking care of trafficking survivors. And so as far as I know, she's safe, thankfully. And I'm not sure the fate of the trafficker, but yeah, that was one, like a very, I think, relieving feeling after just seeing all of her red flags and being afraid for his safety, that he was arrested and she was safe.
And these people being arrested are not the people that you think they would look like sick freaks. They're white collar, many times business people, right? Who are very successful business people who you would never imagine are a part of this.
Yeah. So I think that exactly, like especially when we talk about the buyers, like the people paying for sex, especially with teens and kids, are people that we probably interact with on a daily basis. I talked to a girl who was trafficked in Kansas City, and she told me that she was bought by lawyers, doctors, men in the military, and pastors.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. Those are people I work with. Yeah. And so I think that, again, our perception has to shift, and we have to talk about in society, why are there so many people who want to pay for sex, and why are we not addressing that? And, I think there's so many angles to this that need to be talked about.
Right. It's like protecting the children means we need to become accountable for who's buying and supporting this multi-billion-dollar business. Exactly. And there are no borders on the web. So like people can be buying a child from across the world, on the other side of the world, and it's happening all the time, and the money going through. So, what's interesting, Heidi, and I'd love for us to just kind of wrap this up, but not miss something really important, because I don't want to leave people hanging. I mean, there's so much more data, gang. And one of the things that I got an awareness to is how important it is to know, people think, our kids are fine. We stay off our phones at dinner and we tell them to be off their phones at 9:00. This has nothing to do with this. This is all the social media platforms where they're posting pictures. A trafficker can find them, lure them in, right? They act like they're a 12-year-old. They act like they're an 8-year-old or a 15-year-old, just like your story you shared. And then they groom them and get them to really like them, get them to start sharing pictures. And before you know it, like that story you shared, they're being threatened and being sold, or they meet them and then this is where they end up being kidnapped and taken away. But most of what we're talking about is stuff that's happening in our own back door and are behind, in places you would never imagine. The piece that I just want to end on is, what can you give us as parents, adults, people, whether you have children or you are around children or people, what can we start doing? Give us 2 or 3 things, Heidi, tips as we end this.
Yeah. So I would say probably some of the biggest piece of advice that I can give you is, just like you were saying, Holly, is trafficking doesn't look like what's typically stereotyped and typically shared on social media or in the news. So a lot of times people are afraid that their kids are going to get kidnapped from IKEA or Target. And I can say, from a forensic standpoint, there is nothing to substantiate those claims. We've never, ever seen that happen at our hospital or really anywhere in the United States. So if law enforcement is not behind that, saying, yes, there is actually someone kidnapping people, don't share those things. Don't repost them. Don't perpetuate something that's not true. If you don't know that it's true, don't share it, because what it does is distract from the reality, which is exactly like you were saying, traffickers who are pretending to be friends with your child on social media. That's where most traffickers are making contact with kids. Traffickers who are asking for naked pictures and then blackmailing. Traffickers who are, making friends with kids at church or work or mutual friends, not kidnapping kids off the street. So I think a lot of people think of human trafficking in those terms, and that's not actually what it looks like. And if you don't believe me, I challenge you to go do research and actually look up trafficking cases. And a lot of times what you'll see is it's vulnerable kids who were groomed by a trafficker over time. I'd say the other thing that you can do is that you can protect your kids. So I know that hearing this talk, it probably feels really overwhelming and just like, oh my gosh, the world is falling apart around me. But the reality is, I want to empower you. You have control to protect your kids, which means you have to be engaged and know what they're looking at, who they're talking to, what's happening on their phone, what's in their pictures, who their friends are on social media. And that's really time consuming and really difficult to do. And so I think for a lot of parents, it's okay, well, I have a good kid. I don't need to look, it'll be fine. Or I looked last week. Just like that story of that girl that I told, she was being trafficked in the room next to her parents and had no idea. And I have seen that happen so many times with kids, that they are sexually abused or exploited or blackmailed when they have good parents and good homes. It's just that no one is aware of what's happening in their world on their phone.
Yeah. Look at you. I'm getting you worked up. You're like, please pay attention. You want to shake everybody, right? It's like, please wake up.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting too, because Charlene, founder of Internet Sense, and, such an amazing guru who's making a difference, it was because of what happened to her niece. Mm-hmm. And, just so everybody knows, we met the amazing mother, who was brave enough to stand up and speak and share for a few minutes, which was heartbreaking. But when you meet somebody whose child was trafficked by your neighbors at 4 years old, because that's where she would go every day to play, and you thought the neighbors were a safe place, and they were doing it to their own children. Uh-huh. So, this is why we want people to wake up. And, this whole like social media, I love that it's like you wanted to scream, Heidi, look at the phones. And the other thing that we heard at the summit was, by the way, parents, if you think, oh, well, I need to respect their privacy. Hell no, you don't. You own that phone. By the way, you will be taken to court and you will be held responsible for pictures that are circulated that are on your child's phone. If you are paying for that phone and they're under the age of 18, right? Mm-hmm. That's the reality. So people you have a right to say, I'm looking at your phone. This is not about, not trusting you. It's about not trusting all the people out there. So, oh, Heidi, well, you are, I'm going to say it again, an angel on assignment, because we started chatting, everybody, before we got onto the interview. And I said, so how's it going so far this year? And you go, it's been pretty busy. And I said, you're probably the only person that would say that. And I'd think, oh, that's not a good sign.
True.
Yes. But you're pulling together a lot of people and communities and nationally bringing awareness. And I just thank you for being here with me today. And, it's fascinating for anybody listening. If you're anywhere near Las Vegas on February 8th, I've been very blessed to receive an honor as a Shiro of the Year, but it's not about me. What I realized in this incredible honor is that the founder is all about, they created one of the very first child trafficking safe places in Vegas, and now it's all over 5 states. And so I'm more passionate about finding ways to help that we can give back and start serving and supporting. So if you can be at that event on February 8th, reach out, let me know. It's hollydowling.com, the website. And for Heidi, for anybody that would like to learn more about you, Heidi, how would you prefer? There's going to be people scared after this. And if they want to reach out to you, what serves you best? How would you like that to happen?
That's a really good question. I'm not as fancy as Holly, you guys. I don't have a website.
Oh, stop it.
You can find me at LinkedIn. That's probably the best way. And if you want to send me a message, that's great. And congratulations on your award.
Oh, thank you, my love. Thank you. Actually, Charlene surprised me, and her and Mike are flying into Vegas for it. She saw the announcement, and she's a month ago, and she's like, we're coming. We didn't, and Heidi, talk about divine and serendipity. When that was announced, we didn't even understand or realize the founder was the founder of this child trafficking entire project and gala. So think about how God keeps bringing people together for a cause that's much greater than us. Right?
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah. And I just want to reiterate for Heidi, it's Heidi and Olson, Olson. This will be in the blog, but thank you for letting people reach out to you on LinkedIn. And we are both a part of now a new global council around this. So you'll be seeing and hearing from us lots. Who knows what parts of the world we'll be in. And Heidi, it hit me with goosebumps. Before we hang up, I have to tell you something. So, at the beginning of the call or when we chatted and I asked if you'd met Dr. Max, my son's oncologist, and she has since retired. But this is going to blow your way. But 26 years ago, this week, it was January 3rd, my son was diagnosed with cancer, and it was January 8th, tomorrow, my second son was born. And it was by the grace of God that our team at Children's Mercy Hospital helped save Jake's life, because it was very rare. So I just have to say, I can't believe we're having this call today. And this week will always be a very, very monumental time in my life. Let's leave it at that. So
yeah.
See?
Wow. That gave me goosebumps too.
This is what happens when we're all together. We're going to be together a lot. I'm going to say it because I say it to the people I love. I love you. I adore you. And I thank you for being in my life and being here on this earth doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Look at us. We're not going to cry. We've cried enough. Thank you for joining me for another awesome celebration of you. If you were inspired by this story, please share it with your family and friends and hashtag Your Story Matters. I'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment on iTunes. And absolutely, please come to my website, hollydowling.com. Leave a comment there too, and while you're there, pick up your free gift. Most importantly, though, just remember that your life is a gift from God. What you do with it is your gift back.